Greetings and welcome back, traveler. Before you is a door of which there is no key. However, you may enter when you lift the veil, so you may see.
There's so many different topics we're going to get into tonight with Peter Moon in the second hour, or third hour of the broadcast, I should say. I definitely want to get into the Transylvania series and the most amazing archaeological artifact to be discovered in the history of mankind, a chamber that contains a holographic record of Earth's history as well as holographic readouts of human and other DNA as well. I'm wondering if the others may be the others that other guests have spoken about here on the broadcast. But speaking of the others, I want to go back to Montauk here for just a moment. Peter, there's been so many tales told about Montauk, everything from time travel to alien interaction to, I even heard that they have a machine that they were torturing children and taking the energy of these tortured children and projecting them onto cities to manipulate people emotionally. So what is the truth? What exactly is going on in Montauk, or did go on in Montauk?
Well, this kind of ties into where I was kind of going in the last segment. I was talking about white noise, and white noise represents everything. And if you look into scientific definitions of white noise, they will always tell you, if they're being honest, that their ability to perceive white noise is limited by the instrumentation that they're using. In other words, so if they're perceiving white noise with a certain instrument, that instrumentation is going to have certain limits on it, just by the nature of. So white noise represents anything and everything. It's the gateway to the dimensions, and Preston basically defined it as that which could correlate zero time. In other words, it would correlate all of the manifestations. So what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with potentials of anything and everything. So when you hear stories like that, inducing trauma, this is of the daemon realm. And it could be, God knows what happened at Montauk. Were they picking up trauma from other timelines, from this timeline? Were they torturing people in this physical domain? These things are the type of crimes that if they occurred in this domain, you can't really pin the tail on the donkey. What's important is the transmission of the trauma. And certainly they had the capabilities to alter moods and to affect whole populations. What you have, unfortunately, with the rise of the Montauk story, you have a lot of people trying to get on the stage and get their 10 minutes of fame or whatever it is, and to get attention. And not only to get attention, but to focus people on trauma and to drag them down. And it becomes a, sort of a psychic mind game. Yes, there were horrible things that went on at Montauk. No question about it. But to sit there, it's like, why are zombies so popular on television right now? It's the lemming effect. People will watch the most, unsultry things because they're of the way they're entrained. So there is a lot of, I guess, what you call high-level spirituality in the Montauk series that I did. But the majority of humanity will come right at this this traumatized level and sit there and seek to continue it, sometimes in the name of exposing it.
Oh, I hear this all the time, and it's sickening. I hear people going on and on and on in great detail about these very, very horrific events. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. When people do that, as you said, in the name of exposing it, they're prolonging it and reliving it over and over and over again and perpetuating it as well.
Yes, exactly. And this has been a problem since day one in my investigation. And one of the most disconcerting things was in the 90s when David Icke became super popular by talking about reptilians. What he was doing was putting people into their reptilian mind. And this was only a reflection of his own reptilian mind. We all have reptilian minds. It's a part of our human anatomy. So it's like if you took, like I know he took a lot of ayahuasca,
mm-hmm.
and, you start to, that's like a mind amplifier. You see reptilians. I've talked to people who take ayahuasca. Yeah, I see reptilians. In other words, it amplifies certain things. And then he's interviewing people that see reptilians and see all this trauma and blah, 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 blah. And what it does is it entrains your mind to focus on this sort of thing. And you can argue that it exposes evil.
Wait a minute. Let me take a step back. Who are you referring to?
David Icke.
David Icke. Oh, okay.
He's famous for reptilians,
right?
And more famous than anything for reptilians. But the thing is, in other words, this is a focusing of of his own reptilian mind. As I said, we all have reptilian minds. But it doesn't mean you need to focus on it. And as I say, this is sometimes exposed under the name of exposing evil. But, we're sitting here in a world right now, that does not really distinguish itself in terms of having improved, by reason of all this sort of focusing on reptilians. In some ways, it's more reptilian than ever.
I would say so. I speculate that the reptilians actually had this world before the humans did, and we're actually the invaders.
Well, it is speculation, but the point of it is we all have reptilian minds, but one needs to evolve beyond that. So, in other words, what I've done, and I didn't, spend my time focusing on reptilians, per se, but what I did do is I did discover that this ancient ground, what Montauk was, they had pyramids. I wrote a book called Pyramids of Montauk. And this was found as a result of doing a lot of poking holes into deep, dark, occult corners. I discovered that there were pyramids at Montauk. And I was eventually able to meet the medicine man, the shaman of the Montauk Indians, who were known as the pharaohs. And the pharaohs were the guardians of these pyramids. They were called pharaohs, the pharaohs of Montauk. And the family name is Pharaoh, of the ruling tribe. They were the ruling royal tribe of Long Island. And, of course, they had a connection to Egypt. And, of course, over a long period of time, the medicine man became my friend, Artie Crippen, and he eventually introduced me to his spiritual teacher, who was Roosevelt Gainey, a Qigong grandmaster who operates out of Brooklyn, New York, who I was just with this morning. I study with him once a week. And of course, this is a complete, upside down of all this drama that occurs in the, so-called paranormal community. And it all is based upon breathing. Breath is life.
Right. But Peter, I do have to say that people like Paul Hellyer have come out and said that we're working with all of these different alien species, mm-hmm. and then the stories from Montauk say that we were working with them there as well. So I would say that we have to at least look into what these alien species are actually doing, or if they even exist. We'll get more into that right on the other side. Don't go anywhere. I get from the conversation, Peter, and in the next hour I do want to shift it over to synchronicity, the seventh seal, and especially this archaeological discovery of a holographic projection of Earth's history. But what I get from our previous conversation is that whatever's happening at Montauk hasn't necessarily been exaggerated. So the question comes in, are they working with some type of extraterrestrial or maybe even interdimensional beings? And do we have them at the helm of government right now? Are they essentially the dark overlords that our government works for?
Well, in pragmatic function, as you go through your pragmatic day, these things don't tend to show up too much. You might see something suggestive of a dark shadow at times when you're dealing with government issues, certainly around the 9/11 stuff. But people, the word alien means foreign or exotic. It's something that you're not familiar with. That's what makes it an alien. So there's a lot of things. People only use a small portion of their brain. If they used all of their brain, if they used all of their breathing. So it's like when you're dealing with a brain that's 90% not functioning, people, they start thinking about aliens and they really don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they're, this universe functions on its own. It doesn't need, voyeuristic humans making comments and writing books about it. It really doesn't. So it's like when humans begin to go out and make their expositions on such things, most of it is speculative and limited by the viewpoint of the writer or the individual. I'm no exception to that, But the thing is you have to take yourself more seriously than you do the affairs of what you might call multi-universal alien corporations. People who are obsessed with aliens would do far better as individuals to get these aliens out of their mind. And this is where I was going with the Qigong and the evolution of the spirit and the evolution of the body and the mind, whereas you're actually in getting your brain to function from 10% to 100% by learning how to breathe. So most people are breathing with like 5% of their lung capacity. We'll get it to breathe on all your lung capacity. Then you'll be able to think more clearly. And then you won't have all of this projects like Montauk that basically take over people's minds and create obsessive compulsive disorders or fester them. And this is really what we have so much with the so-called alien phenomena, which is a phenomena, but it's like one of the most disconcerting aspects of the phenomena of the Montauk programmees or the abductees of the alien stuff is that they've lost control of their own ability to influence their own life. And then to perpetrate, as you were saying earlier, to continue to fester the wound rather than to, overcome it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that occur in this universe that are mysterious, and we're going to be talking about some of them. Sometimes we need to take care of our own backyard before we, because so much of what out there is just clearly speculative. And it's okay to speculate, but there's a certain point where for me, it does not become interesting anymore. We've heard too many stories. We've heard too many this, too many that. Where does it all go? We've heard all this mystery of Area 51 unveiled. Well, what do we really know about Area 51? Nothing.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That is true.
We've heard so much about it, but what do we really know? There are a lot of speculation, a lot of information, just that it's a highly secretive activity and something's gone on there. So it begins to sound like a whole, propaganda campaign that's been perpetrated on us that's thrown off the scent. Whatever.
Well, my interest in aliens, and I think a lot of people's interest in aliens, comes from the idea that we could have brothers and sisters out there. that we've been quarantined from, we're not in contact with, and there is a much bigger world out there than we're actually realizing. I mean, just imagine an animal in a cage. Eventually it's going to start to wonder what's outside of that cage, and if there's other animals out there too. Why should we not do that as spiritually evolved beings?
Well, what becomes really interesting as you begin to study time, and these videos at the Time Travel Education Center will lead you in that direction, is you find out that the time is circular. We're actually on a big loop. So what that means is the past is the future is the past. This is why we keep discovering artifacts. I say we, I'm talking about us collectively as a planet. You know, they keep finding more and more ancient civilizations, and that these civilizations knew things. We're going to discover in the future that this is us. You know, we don't have to go to other solar systems. We can if we want, but in other words, we're going to discover ourselves. It's all a process. Time is a process of self-discovery. So, you know, you going into the future, you're going to go into your past, our past. It's the same with aliens. It's like you're going to discover
yourself,
parts of yourself. Just like one of the first things I was taught about God from, I guess, a Christian perspective from my mother, who grew up Catholic, and she said that God is everywhere. Well, what the hell does that mean? And you're thinking of a God, trying to put the God everywhere. You know, everything is God. God is in you. You know, God is everywhere. Well, what is everywhere? It's consciousness. You know, so, you know, we're all part of the same consciousness. So yes, everything that you see is a part of you, is a part of God, is a part of creation. So yes, it's a process of self-discovery, and as we learn in pragmatic reality, there's some people and things we want to associate with. There's some people and things we don't want to associate with. We're having a tremendous amount of violence reported through the news media, and a tremendous amount of violence that's not being reported in the news media, probably mostly because they don't have enough room to report it. You know, I'm sure they would report it if they had a violence channel, but they don't.
I can imagine that. That's probably next on the agenda.
Yeah, that's coming out next year.
Yeah, well, but I mean, they do have certain channels that feature violence, but I'm saying is you hear of all these shootings, and it's like, yeah, as bad, as horrific as these are, most of us are not being shot or having to deal with being shot or our friends being shot on a daily basis. So as bad as that is, you know, we have a lot of room to grow and think and you know, be kind of normal. At the same time, if you look in the right places, you can find all sorts of horror stories and really disastrous situations on Earth. I mean, traditionally, more than half the planet is starving. So who are us lucky ones that get to sit here and iterate and speculate about stuff that, you know, these people who are starving, you know, don't really have the luxury of speculating on. You know, they're more concerned with their atrophying condition.
So what do we do?
Well, we can only live our own lives, you know.
And if but if our lives take us to the exploration of the cosmos, then that is living our own lives.
Yeah, I mean I'm saying, but it's a luxury.
Oh, it is. It is for sure.
It's a luxury, and as they say, we need to you know, focus on our own lives, whatever that is. And you know, some people. I mean, as a young man, boy, I wanted to be an astronaut. I thought that was the pioneer place of reality. As I grew up, I said, that's like a monkey going out in a box. I want to have nothing to do with being an astronaut. And then you later hear stories of them being programmed. You know, so
right.
What I'm saying, it's like, I want to explore space with NASA? No way. You know.
That makes right. A lot of sense. Peter, before we hit the break, please give us your websites.
TimeTravelEducationCenter.com is where I would direct people. TimeTravelEducationCenter.com. There is also DigitalMontauk.com. They're two different sites. There's also skybooks.usa.com if you want to purchase books.
Excellent. Well, coming up in just a few moments, I do want to get into the Transylvania series. I'm very interested to know what type of holographic records were left and what our Earth really is all about. Don't go anywhere. Hour number 3 coming up with Peter Moon right here as we step even further beyond the veil.
To initiate phase 3 momentarily. Brace yourself, traveler. We are about to venture into the realms of the unknown. www.beyondtheveilradio.com.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
We are TFR.
My dear traveler, remember this. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to the plane are, for the time being, are only realities. However, if we mistake the shadows for realities, we find ourselves confusing the upward progress of the ego as an elevation of consciousness. Thus, beware of oneself when you step beyond the veil.
We will be getting into the holographic records here in just a few moments with Peter Moon. Right now, I want to go over to Skinwalker Ranch that's been tormented by trespassers. Once the site of an incredible array of anomalous events, the infamous Skinwalker Ranch has become plagued by a decidedly more human phenomenon, curious trespassers. What made the Skinwalker Ranch unique is a sheer variety of odd events which has allegedly took place there, including phantom wolf encounters, Thunderbird sightings, UFOs of many kinds, sizes, and shapes, and various mysterious animal deaths as well. In connection to Native American lore surrounding a curse invoking an entity known as the Skinwalker, only served to further fuel interest in the potentially one-of-a-kind site. I remember when we were driving around that area, we almost stopped by there. Jesse Ventura covered that. And astronomers are baffled by origin of mysterious radio source from space. It has been observed about 21 radio sources from outer space using NASA's Space Observatory, and they've made a shocking discovery. Out of all of them, they analyzed 4 cases that exhibit anomalous characteristics. Astronomers in Italy undertook an observational campaign to study and analyze a group of unassociated radio sources using NASA's Swift Space Observatory. They found that some of the radio sources cannot be determined, suggesting that they may be originating from a source that is currently invisible to us. Astronomers have explained that these radio emissions originate from something that we're not able to observe, in this case, a group of active galaxies that are obscured from our view. There may be much more out there than we see. As a matter of fact, we know that there's much more out there than we can see because as we develop technology, we're able to see more and more and more of the spectrum that our eyes, nose, and ears cannot pick up. There is definitely something maybe interdimensional. I mean, you can really think about that. When you really think about this, when you use a technology to reveal something that's outside of our spectrum, would that be considered interdimensional?
I think so, and it kind of takes me back to just a few days ago when the police helicopter caught that UFO on infrared, and they put it out to the public because they seriously didn't know what it was. And you could say that that's kind of interdimensional because you can't see it with the naked eye, but yet it is there.
People are playing with energies they don't know
or understand.
Emergency need for exorcists after surge in people dabbling in Satanism and black magic. Exorcists are in urgent demand as a result of a sharp rise in people dabbling in Satanism and the occult. Experts from the Catholic Church in Italy and the U.S. have said speaking in tongues, levitating, and vomiting may seem far-fetched to most people, but church experts insist there is a need to recruit more priests as exorcists in order to combat sorcery and black magic.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's kind of funny.
I think, it's kind of funny. But Walter Cascioli, a psychologist and scientific consultant, described as an emergency the lack of priests capable of fighting the forces of evil. I think we can all fight the forces of evil just by looking within ourselves.
Very well said. We'll be right back. Peter Moon will be rejoining us right on the other side. We will get into the holographic records of planet Earth.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting.
Welcome, fellow traveler, to phase 3 of this journey. Here you will experience an even deeper level of understanding as we traverse through the boundaries of hyperspace consciousness. Here, you will find that reality is altered with a single thought and a single intention. Set your intention now and prepare to travel deeper. Beyond the veil.
Let's get back into it. Peter Moon is our guest for the next hour. Let's talk about the Transylvania series and the discoveries there. Peter, according to this, there's been a chamber that has been discovered that contains a holographic record of Earth's history and holographic readouts of human DNA and other species as well. Can you take us down that journey, please?
Well, yes. This is from the book Transylvania Sunrise by Radu Sinamar, which is also contributed to by myself in the English version. The original version is in the Romanian language. And this is a story of a discovery of a chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx in 2003, where the Americans and Romanians forged an alliance. The Americans had the technology, and they were the ones who initially saw the chamber through ground-penetrating radar through Pentagon satellites, and solicited the cooperation of the Romanian secret Department Zero, their most secretive part of their secret service. And they were able to, as I say, dig down underneath and find this ancient chamber, some 50,000 years old, they believe, where they found machinery, or I don't know what you call it, machinery, modern. It would look modern, although it was very ancient, whereby if you put your hand over a certain table, and these tables were like 6 feet high, like it was like a giant race or something who constructed them, and you put your hand over the table and it would read out your DNA. The closer you put it to the table, it would read it out in molecular form, closer yet atomic form. Now this would just be the DNA and the graphic projection of your hand. If you were to go to another table, it would read out, depending on where you put it, a planet with a star system and a species. And then if you put another hand on another part of the table, your other hand, it would show another species with the planet it came from, And if you had both hands at the same time, it would show a hybridization of those two species. This was a virtual Noah's Ark, but a much more modern version of one that would have all sort of DNA potentials with a planet that they are attributable to. This is a sort of a Pandora's box of creation. Is what this a blueprint room of different DNA potentials. Now, you could also make the argument that any piece of DNA, whether it's human or another DNA, because DNA, as we know it, has a certain pattern to it, has the potential to form any of these different permutations. Now, also in this chamber was what's called a projection hall, which could show a history of mankind in a holographic form. And the peculiar thing about this, and another one of the, there was another chamber beneath the Giza Plateau in Book 3 called The Mystery of Egypt, whereby you could travel into time with your consciousness, but not physically. Both of these machines, that one and also the projection hall where you could look at the history of the world, were what you call bioresonant. In other words, if you sit down and look at it, you'll see something different than if I sit down and look at it. It might not be vastly different. You might look at Scotland and I might look at Ireland, depending on what our interests and where our DNA came from, whatever it is. So the fact that they're bioresonant is a very key clue to not only understanding what's going on here, but how to work with such factors if they begin to come more online in one's life. In other words, it's conducive to your consciousness. And this is very interesting.
So essentially, we all came from the stars, and this is what you were alluding to and referring to when you say that we're always going to come back and find out that it was always us, and it always has been us. But I think the allure of this type of exploration is the idea of understanding who we are.
Oh, yes, and it's in Qigong we would refer to it as the infinite mind. There's part of us that is our self mind, our small mind, and there's part of us that is infinite mind. That is everything, and that's a connectivity that one wants to practice and work at every day, which I do. But as I say, it's part of a self-discovery, and we're living in very unique times. If you evaluate history in the last hundreds of thousands of years, we're living in very unique times where things are rapidly changing. So yes, this is part of the exploration process, and there's a lot of psychological factors you could look at with people. My generation is slowly expiring right now as a generation. They will live longer than the previous generation. The generation after that, I don't know if they will live as long.
Right. Especially
I don't know.
Well, no, it's true. The bombardment of vaccines, fluoride, stuff coming from the sky, the radiation from nuclear disasters. I mean, we're constantly bombarded by everything.
You're right. And we could say that it was a much safer place to live in 400 years ago, but then again, you might have been living under the realm of some horrible, despot or tyrant, or you might be swept up into a religious crusade. It's like even though the air was more breathable and the food supply wasn't as tainted, there were other factors that might have been far more negative.
Right, and going further back, you had to watch out for saber-toothed tigers. You had to watch out for all kinds of disasters.
Well,
so,
and I'm just thinking about, what if you went back to, say, the 1400s or the 1300s, and you end up getting the Black Death or something? I mean, you're exposed to so much back then in the food supply, in the water. You could get cholera.
Yes, there were positives and negatives in any time period. So, if you were living with the Hunses back then, maybe you would have lived 200 instead of 100. I don't know what was going on in their culture back in the 1400s, but the Hunses of the Himalayas, who live a very long time. But yes, it's partly a crapshoot where we end up and what opportunities and enjoyments and possibilities we have to evolve in a given life.
Well, I'm interested to know more about our historical records, not only from a DNA perspective, but did this discovery chronicle any events that took place? Because I speculate that there have been several reset events that have wiped out civilizations time and time again. We may be on the verge of another reset event. We'll find out more from Peter Moon right on the other side. Peter, these holographic records, do they say anything about physical events? Maybe disclose something about Atlantis or any of these mysteries that people have been speculating on? And do they reveal any truths when it comes to a reset event or other technologically advanced civilizations that existed here on planet Earth?
Well, yes, and one of those that's put forth in the book and that is showed in the history of the Earth and is that the tectonic plates around the Carpathian Mountains, the center of which is Transylvania, is been deliberately concocted so as to protect that area, particularly during the so-called Atlantean flood time of some 10,000 years ago. Or whenever it was, and the ice age that occurred. This area was protected during the ice age, and in other words, all civilization that existed outside of that area was forced to go back into that area, and then eventually re-emerge from that area. So that would be one of the tales of the origin of, certainly the Western culture, and that the root language, which they used to call it Indo-Aryan, they changed the name to Indo-European, but that root language is very closely aligned with the Romanian language of today, which has been a whole history of Romania has been. It wasn't Romania became a country after the war known as, I can't even remember the name of the war. It was a very famous war in the late 1800s. I just can't remember the name of it. So Romania was formed, but they changed the whole Romanian language and they put it on the Latin alphabet. It used to be Cyrillic alphabet, and they began to teach people that Romanian came from Latin, and but you can take a Romanian person and they can understand Spanish, they can understand French and Italian much easier than vice versa. Whereas Italians can't understand Spanish, Spanish can understand Italians, but Romanians can understand them all.
Interesting.
So, yeah, and this is not recognized by academia. There's even if you look on Wikipedia, it's called chronocentrism. They invented a word to kind of dispel the idea that there's certain Romanians that have put forth some of the ideas that I'm saying. Not usually in all the same. They usually put bits and pieces of what I just said, but basically they've invented this word called chronocentrism to explain that a culture that thinks they're the center of everything. So they've used this word to explain away Romania. How can Romanians dare, this little country, actually not such a small country, it's about the size of Texas, and they say, how can they dare say that they are the center of everything? Well, it's the history. It's their known history. So this is what these books in the Transylvania series, taught me. And it's not exclusively from the books. I've taken many trips there, and I've been taught many things. So Romanians look at the world much differently. And of course, where I was visiting this last summer is a place I'd visited 2 summers previously, a place called Chaklavina Cave, which is a very famous cave to anthropologists and whatnot for its anthropology, but it was Dr. David Anderson, the inventor of the time reactor, told me in a podcast we did in June of 2015 that cave was the only known location on Earth where there was evidence of a time reactor discharge that he said occurred 200 or 2,000 years ago. So I returned to that cave, and he was very surprised to know that I had been to that cave, the previous year. In 2014, I returned to that cave this year. I put up 2 videos on the cave, one before I left on the trip and one upon my return. I found a few more entrances to the cave. It's a huge cave, and determined that the time reactor discharge probably occurred deep within the cave, because it's a cave that's some 7 kilometers long and connects with, many other caves, and these caves will take you right down into the inner earth, which is where so much of the mystery of Transylvania resides.
Into the inner earth? Are you referring to the hollow earth?
The inner earth. I mean, and great portions of it are hollow. I can't tell you how much of it's hollow and how much of it's not. But if you go into these caves, you will hit certain areas where it's just like, it's a huge black space.
Wow.
You don't, and it's these caves are deep, deep, deep. So like, say, if somebody wants to make the argument that, people couldn't have survived in the Carpathians during the Ice Age in the valley, which is Transylvania, well, they could have easily gone into the caves and survived, because there's a water supply. It's 55 degrees down there. You can survive. You're going to have to adapt to the conditions. So this was a place where people could survive and have survived. And you have nature there. You have the farms there that have been intact with the same families for thousands upon thousands of years, possibly tens of thousands of years, but we know for thousands and thousands of years. So there's a consistency in the DNA that serves the soil that makes these natural foods. So you have real organic natural food in Transylvania that you do not have in America. And even a farm that's been in America, if you're lucky, it's been here a couple hundred years. You don't have too many of those where the same families that work in it. So you have a whole ambiance of nature that is nothing like I've ever seen in my life. And if you're spiritually inclined, you will have adventures accordingly in that area, which I can go into if this is the time.
Please do.
All right. Well, one of the things I learned, one of the first things that happened to me when I was in Romania was I was approached by a beggar, and this is a tradition in Romania, and I didn't understand it. I didn't give him anything. I didn't have any coinage that was in his realm. He's a very unusual man, and the beggar will come to you and ask you for something. He's testing your heart, and if you give him something, he will open the heart of Romania to you. Well, it took me a while to learn this, and what these beggars are is they are disguised as what are called the Solomonari. This is where the word Solomon comes from. It comes from Solomon and Sol and moon. Sol is sun and Mon is moon. The Solomonari, this is a word that they used long before there was a King Solomon. And they will come out of the inner earth. They are spiritual entities or beings that will appear as sheep, shepherds, or beggars, and they will test your heart. And if you pass the test, they will take you into the underground for initiation. And they have a patron god named Zalmoxes, who was the teacher of Pythagoras, and he was the one who had 4 years of initiation in the caves of Transylvania, in which he emerged as a god afterwards and achieved immortality.
Wow. I want to hear more about that right when we get back from the break. This is really fascinating stuff. I wish we would have gotten into this in the first hour so we can have more time on the subject. We'll be right back.